Okay, this is the start of Chapter 8. We're moving into Chapter 8, and it's on budgeting. And I do want you to go read the chapter, and I want you to look at my outline. My outline is very good. The outline is so good, I'm not going to lecture, at least not verbally, on the outline, because if you go read the outline, it's wonderful. In fact, it's posted on Moodle already, in case you can't see that. But anyway, the chapter will tell you that budgets tell you about the overall company. They coordinate the activities of a company. They make management communicate with all facets of a company. They help determine how you're going to use your resources. They help to hold people responsible. Again, you're supposed to stay within your budget and use your budget wisely. You can get that all from the chapter, and I'm going to basically use this to solve problems, but I will give you one anecdotal story. When I was at Caterpillar, I was working in cost accounting, and they asked me if I wanted to work in budgets, and I told them no. The reason I thought budgets sounded boring and budgets sounded detailed, and cost accounting, I got to work out in the plant every day. I got to look at processes out in the plant, and I got to really work with the UAW, try and reduce costs and redesign parts. I thought that was very interesting, and budgets didn't appeal to me. But that was a career mistake. I guarantee you that if you're ever approached to work in budgets, you should say yes. Even though budgets are detailed, even though budgets are boring, the difference is if you work in budgets, had I taken that job, I would have worked with all the vice presidents and presidents and worked with all the higher level people in the company to design and tie a budget together. Instead, I stayed in a less significant position that I enjoyed, which was, again, managerial and cost accounting. I was compensated well, I was treated well, but my career would have went better had I taken that job in budgets. Budgets show you the overview of the whole company. They teach you, again, when you're going to get your cash, if you're not going to have enough cash, if you're going to have to borrow, if you're going to be short on materials or supplies, and they show you how the whole company relates. I should have done that. It would have made me a better person. Don't make my mistakes. If they ever ask you to work in budgets, take the job. Even if you think, this is going to be tedious and a bit boring. It probably will be, but you'll be working with high-level people because that's usually, many times, they are mainly responsible for the budget. Anyway, I'll stop the tape, but then we're going to jump right into exercise, the foundational exercise, which will give us a whole overview of the chapter. So without further ado, let's move to that. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Again, this is the beginning of Chapter 8. This is a very large problem, very complex problem, very, very wonderful problem. It'll take us completely through the chapter. Chapter 8, page 391, it's a foundational problem. And I do think we need to read through it. It's a Morgantown company, and they make one product. I happen to know what that product is, a big wrench. Again, a big wrench looks something like this. It's a large wrench, and it sells for $70 a piece. That's what it sells for. It's a huge wrench for, let's say, power takes offs on tractors or something. But it's a big, weighs, 10, 15 pounds, I don't know. Anyway, they make one product, and it's this wrench. It's provided the following information to help, this is cut off a little bit, but help to prepare the master budget. And you guys should have looked at the chapter, and the master budget has many components. Usually you start with a sales budget. Then you do a production budget, an ending inventory budget, an administrative budget, and then you do direct materials, direct labor, overhead, then a cash budget, and then you finally do an income statement budgeted and a balance sheet. But anyway, that's in the notes. We're probably going to start, I suspect this problem will start with sales, because you see sales, almost all the other schedules, all other budgets, are derived from sales. Do you see the nature of it? If you know what you sell, you'll know what you need to spend to sell that, to make it and sell it. Anyway, let's take a look at all this information. It says the budgeted selling price is $70. Okay, so I got that right here, $70. That's what we sell for. They have the unit sales for June, July, August, and September. All right, so, let's just do this. This is, again, June, July, August, and this is September, okay? and these are budgeted. So they think they're going to sell 84 wrenches of these wrenches in June, July 10,000, August 12, and September 13. So it looks like, again, as they get into the later part of summer, they sell more wrenches. 40% of credit sales. Oh, by the way, it says all sales are on credit. That probably is true. They're selling to Farm and Fleet, Tractor Supply, and none of those places pay with cash. They pay with credit. And they sell again, maybe they sell to, I don't know, they could sell to Walmart, and they could sell to Farm Services, but anyway, it says 40% of credit sales are collected in the month of sale, 60% in the following month. So 40% of credit sales, okay. So they're saying 40% in the month of sale, 60% later. Okay, do you guys see that when we sell on credit, that again, 40% of the time people will pay us in the month, 60% of the time they pay us in the following month. You know what, I do want to check to see that that shows up in my, no it doesn't. Hang on a second, let me back this up just a hair. There we go. Now you can see what I wrote over here. 40% of the time we get the money in the month of sale, even though it's on credit, they pay us in the same month. 60% of the time it comes in the second month. A lot of information here. The ending finished goods inventory equals 20% of the following month's sales. So again, they're doing a budget. They're saying finished goods inventory, we got to budget how many of these wrenches we make. When we budget that, we not only want to make the amount that we're going to sell, but we want an extra 20% for next month. See the following month's unit sales. The ending raw materials inventory, well, to make a wrench, that's steel. And they'll need pounds of steel. The ending raw materials inventory equals, by the way, they probably take these, get a small billet, stamp it out, and then machine the rest of it. So again, they buy, raw billets of steel, or at least slugs or what have you. But anyway, the ending raw materials inventory equals 10% of the following month's raw materials. All right, they're saying again, if we have at the end of any month, we need to have some extra steel, and we're going to plan on having 10% of the following month's raw materials production needs. So again, we're going to use that to budget how much steel do we need to buy and carry. By the way, it says each of these wrenches needs 5 pounds of raw material of steel, and it costs $2 for a pound of raw steel. And again, those probably come in a preformed, again, slug to some extent, but they use that to press it out with a large press. 30% of raw materials purchases, so 30% of raw materials purchases are paid for in the month of purchase. And 70%, okay, so 30% and 7, let's write that over here, 30% and 70%. When we buy raw materials, 30% of the time we pay for the raw materials in the month that we buy them. But a lot of times we wait and pay 70% in the next month. We put it off. You see, again, we put it off because we're given 30 days. The direct labor wage rate is $15, that's important, per hour. Each unit of finished goods requires 2 hours. Now that got cut off, 2 direct labor hours. So again, to make a wrench, it's going to take 2 hours at 15. 2 times 15, $30 to again machine. They'll have to machine this and deburr it and then harden it. All that is again what it takes to get that wrench done, and that's the 2 hours. The variable by the way, that's budgeted. That's what they hope, if everything goes right, to make a wrench. The variable selling and administrative expenses per unit sold is $1.80. Probably most of that is a sales commission and paperwork and might be shipping. The fixed selling and administrative expense is $60,000. That's again probably heat, light, utilities, men and women's salaries that work in administration. All right, the first question is, it says, what are the budgeted sales for July? What are the budgeted sales for July? Well, July is 10,000. I'm assuming they don't want that answer. I think they want 10,000, they want it in dollars. 10,000 wrenches times, what did they say they sell for each? $70 each. So that's what they're really asking, is what's the budgeted sales dollars, not in wrenches, and that's going to be $700,000 in sales. All right, that's, I think, what they want in that number 1. Now, number 2, what are the expected cash collections for July? All right. Well, again, we just said we're going to sell 700,000, but do you remember that they said up here, 40% of the sales are collected in the month of sales, 60% in the following. So anytime we sell, we sometimes, 40% of the time, people will pay us in the month. But then 60% of the time, it's in the month following sales. So if they say, what are your expected cash collections? You'd say, well, I'm going to take, well, let's do it this way. What are we in? This is for July, right? So let's just do July. We know there's $700,000 worth of sales times, we're going to get 40% of that. And 4 times 7 is going to be $280,000. Now you're not, again, not done yet. You might think, well, that was easy. Again, that's in the month of July. That's what they ask. What are the expected cash collections? What are the cash collections? Well, hold it. If you get 40% in the month of sale and 60% in the following month, well, let's go back 1 month. We're in July. Well, what about back in June? In June, we would have got 40% of June in June. But guess what we're going to get? We're going to get 40% of June in June, and then we're going to get 60% of June in July. Remember? This is in the month of sale. This is 1 month following the month of sale. This is in the month of sale, 40. 1 month following. So in June, we'll get 40%, but in June, we'll get 60% of June in July. So let's go back to June. June was 8,400. So let's do this. June was 8,400 wrenches. Each wrench sells for $70 a piece. And we'll take that times 60%. And that equals, I don't know. But we can do it. That's 8,400 wrenches times $70 for each wrench times 0.6. That's 300. Oops, that's not a 3. That's $352,800. And now let's add those up, and we'll get 800. Let me see, 2, 13, 1, $632,800. And that will be the cash that we collect. All right, cash collections. And that's the cash we collect in July. Do you see again? Does that make sense? Go back. In July, we'll get 40% of July sales in July. But if you go back a month, in June, we'll get 40% of June in June, but then we'll get 60% of June in July. And there's our 60%. 40 and 60 is 100% of our receipts for that month. That'll be $632,800. Okay, let's do 3. What is the accounts receivable balance at the end of July? All this is budgeted. We're now, do you see again what they're trying? They say, hey, here's our budgeted sales for July. We think we're going to sell 7. But do you see again how interesting this is, or maybe not? But we're only going to collect 632. We're going to sell 700,000 that month, but we'll only collect 632. So you see again why budgeting brings you to the realization what you sell and what you collect are 2 entirely different things. 3, what is the accounts receivable balance at the end of July? All right, well, would you agree that the accounts receivable balance, we know we collect how much in July? In July, we collected 40% of July in July, but 60% we don't get. So if we want to know how much is still receivable, let's go back and take July's sales. So July's sales are $700,000. And we know we collected 40% of them right here, but 60% of them we did not. So 6 times 7, that should be $420,000, should be our accounts receivable. Now, you might actually say, gee, that doesn't seem that, wonderful to know, but that tells you that, again, that's a very large number, and that's a receivable. It also lets you know you're going to need that for a balance sheet. You're going to need to know what is my accounts receivable for a budgeted balance sheet, so we'll need that later. All right, let's go ahead with 4. 4, according to the production budget, according to the production budget, how many units should be produced in July? All right, according to the production budget, how many units should be produced in July? Production budget. Well, there's a good chance I'll put a production budget on the test. So this fourth step is very important. A production budget always looks like this. First of all, you'd probably put a title on there. What's the name of this company? Morgantown. And we'd say, production budget. And then we do it, let's say, for July. And they always look the same. The production budget says, well, what are you going to sell? Then I also need some ending inventory, because usually most companies would like to carry some ending inventory. We'll subtotal this and call it total production needs. Then we'll say less the beginning inventory. I better write that out. Beginning inventory. By the way, these are on the notes from the chapter. Less the beginning inventory will give you units to produce. And I want to make sure my camera hasn't gone off. Let me check it real quick. Okay, we just got a couple minutes before it kicks off. Do you see this makes sense? All right, what are we, again, they want a production budget for Morgantown. Well, what are we going to sell? Do you agree we're going to do it in wrenches? They didn't tell us to do it in dollars, so 10,000 wrenches, but we want some ending inventory. Do you remember it said we want the ending finished goods inventory? Finished goods, these are things that are going to be done. Finished goods, these are production. Finished goods that produce are 20% of the month's unit sales. So in other words, we don't want to just build what we sell, we want to carry an extra 20% of the next months. So 20% of the next months, well, what was the next month? Let's go back. The next month was August at 12,000. So let's take that times 12,000. And 2 times 20, that should be 2,400 of these wrenches. That gives us total production needs of 12,400. Less beginning inventory. Well, beginning inventory, believe it or not, beginning inventory is last month's ending inventory. Now, this is a little bit tricky. In other words, beginning inventory came from where? If this is July, beginning inventory came from the end of June. Do you remember? What would they have wanted in June? Well, in June, they would have wanted what? 20% of the following month's sales. Well, what is 20% of July? See, in June, they would have wanted 20% of July. So we would have said, all right, 20% of July is 10,000. So 10,000 times 20% is going to be 2,000. And we're going to subtract this. Like I said, do you see where I got the 10,000? In other words, this is July right here. And we're going to take it back in June. We would have wanted 20% of this. That would have been the ending inventory, which becomes the beginning inventory. By the way, do you see why we're subtracting it? We really have those. Beginning inventory, you have custody of those. So again, you don't want to make them. So subtract that out, and your units to produce will be, 10,400. And that's the units to produce in July. Just the logic on that. You know you're going to sell these, so it makes sense to build them. You know you need some extras, so you better build those. You better build 12,400. Okay, we're back in action. So you better build 12,400. But there's only one catch. If you know you should build 12,400, but you know that you've got from the previous month 2,000 wrenches, we don't build those 2,000 you've already got. So this is what you want to build, but you've got 2,000 coming into the month. Back those out, subtract them out, and you need to build, again, you need to produce or build in July 10,400 of these wrenches. So that's number 4. Let's try and do number 5. See if we can squeeze it in. If 61,000 pounds, yeah, we did do number 4, that's right. If 61,000 pounds of raw materials are needed to meet production needs in August, all right, that's the month June, July, August. That's the month following July. How many, and I think this is pounds they're looking for here, it's got cut off. how many pounds are needed to, I know I can read this. It got cut off. If 61,000 pounds of raw materials are needed to meet production needs in August, how many pounds of material are needed to meet production needs in July? So they're really saying, how many pounds of steel do we need for July? All right, let's go back, and actually, they're asking us not for a production budget, but in this case, they're asking us for a direct materials purchases budget. So let's just write that down. They want a direct materials purchases budget. And to get this, it really is identical to this in form. In other words, the only difference is for direct materials purchases budget, instead of starting with what we sell, well, we really are going to start with, again, this, what we're going to produce. You see? In other words, we'll say, all right, it'll look just like this. We'll start with, again, units to produce. Now that will be, again, we know right here in July, we're going to produce 10,400. Now you do need to do this. That's how, again, if you want to know how much raw material you want, you'd say, well, I know I'm going to produce 10,400 of these wrenches, and I know that they what? They use, how many pounds of steel do they use? They use 5 pounds of steel. All right, if they use 5 pounds of steel, take this times 5, and what will you get? 50,000, 52,000. You will need, again, 52,000 pounds of steel for these units that are going to be produced. But hold it, again, we know that they want some extra steel. It says they want the raw materials inventory to be equal to 10% of the following month's raw materials production needs. All right, and it says down here, they do tell us next month's raw materials production needs. They say 61,000 pounds are needed to meet production in August. And they say we want 10% of that. In other words, they don't want to have just the raw. This, if they went out and bought 52,000 pounds of steel, that'd get them 10,400 wrenches. But they want a little extra. And they'd say, all right, you see, add the ending inventory, just like up here. So we'll add ending inventory that they desire, and that's going to be 61,000 pounds from August times 10%, and that's going to be 6,100 pounds. These are all in pounds, LBS. Now that gives you total production needs. That's going to be 58,100. But remember, this is what you really want to go out and buy. You want to buy 58,100 pounds of steel. But you're going to have some steel left over from where? June. So say less. Go back and check. Less the beginning inventory. Well, actually, it's not the... less the beginning inventory from June. Now remember, it's the ending inventory from June, but June's ending inventory becomes our beginning inventory. So we're really saying let's go back to June and get the ending inventory, which now becomes the beginning inventory. So let's just less beginning inventory, and then I'll put a colon here. Less the beginning inventory, it's beginning inventory in this month, but it was the ending inventory for June. Now, what was that going to be? That would have been 10%. Let me see. They would have said, they say, go get 10% of the following month's raw materials cost. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here we are. They want 10% of the following month's raw materials production needs. All right. Well, the raw materials production needs, in this case, now remember, it's going to be from, we got to go back to June. If we go back to June, June would have said get 10% of July. Well, here's July right here. So we'll take 52,000 times 10%, and that will be 5,200. So again, that's again, back in June, we would have said we want 10% of July's production needs right here. So we back out the 5,200, and again, that should be 52,000, I believe, 900 LBS. And let me check that just to make sure. Yeah. Now, did they ask for this if they want pounds for raw material? Yeah, in 6, they said, what are the pounds of material that, again, are needed to meet production needs in July, which we just gave them. It didn't say, put that in dollars. So again, they wanted it in just pounds, so we're done with that. Now, I'm going to switch. I'm going to try and leave this up here, and then I'm going to switch to the other side of the board. We might need some of this later in the problem. So I'm going to shift everything so that we try and finish this. This problem has 15 parts, which is very comprehensive. But like I said, let me switch to the other side of the board, and then we'll pick it up there. All right. Move all my personal items. And let me move the book too. One of the things, I'm not going to be able to display all the requirements. This problem is really long. So I'm going to leave. We need this introductory, we need this information that's in the intro to really solve all the problems. So we're going to keep going with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, but I'm just going to have to read the requirements because I can't display them and display everything at once. So requirement 6, what is the estimated cost of raw materials purchases? What is the estimated cost of raw material purchases for July? Well, we just got done doing over here, we just got done doing the cost of or the amount that we're going to build, or in this case, we just got doing the direct materials. This is what we're going to need in direct materials. So again, to do this, let's go back up to 6. And again, to get the direct materials purchases, and I know you can't see this, but you could just see it a minute ago, it was 52,900 pounds. And I just said that at the end of the other video. 52,900 pounds of raw materials. And they want to know what's again going to be the amount we're going to purchase. All right, the estimated cost of raw materials. Well, what did it say it cost for a pound of steel? Every pound of steel costs $2. So this one I think is pretty easy. Just take it times $2. And what are you going to get? 105,800? Is that right? Oops, that's a poor zero. So that's in dollars. Because what you're saying is, here's the pounds I need. It costs $2 a pound. And I need to actually purchase that. So $105,800 is, again, my materials purchases. All right, that's 6. Let's try and do 7. Seven. I'll have to read it. In 7, it says, in July, what are the estimated cash disbursements for raw materials? Assume the cost of raw materials purchases in June was $88,880. It's painful for me to teach this way. I love to display. I hate to read it to you. All right. Well, it's asking us again for the purchases. In July, what are the total estimated cash disbursements for raw materials purchases? All right, if this is again what we're going to need, we're going to need 2 pounds, $2. We're going to need 52,900 pounds, $2 a pound. We need to buy 105,000. But again, let's go back and look. It says 30% of raw materials purchases are paid for in the month of purchase, and 70% the following month. Well, that means that we're really going to do this. We're just in July. We need $105,800, but you remember we're only going to pay for 30% of that. So take 30% of that, and I don't know what that's going to be. Let's see, 30, 3 times 15, 31.5. It comes to, yeah, 31,740. 31,740. Again, you see that, you're really going to go out and enter into commitments to buy 105.8. When you enter into those commitments, you are really only going to pay for 30% of those in that month, and this is July. But here's the tricky part. Well, remember, if you go back to June, in June you would have paid for 30% of June in June, but then you pay for 70% of June in July. Remember, there's a delay. You always pay for 30% in the month, then you pay for 70% of the previous months in the following month. So in June, you would have paid 30% of June in June, and then 70% of June you'd pay in July. So we need to go back and take whatever that is times 70% for June. Now, it's not up here in this information. They basically tell us another piece of information in the book. They tell us that the cost of raw materials in June was $88,888. $88,880? I think that was it. Seems like a lot of eights. And it is. $88,880. And again, if you take that, that's 62,216. 62,216. All right. So you're saying let's go back to June. That's what we wanted. We entered into purchase contracts for $88,000. But in June, we paid for 30 of that. But in July, in July, we'll pay for 70% of it. So both of these are going to be paid for in July. And if you add those up, you'll get, again, your real cash disbursements, and that will be $93,956. This will be your cash that you're going to pay. DISBURSEMENTS, disbursements. Cash disbursements are cash paid. And that's number 7. And let's do number 8. All right, I have to get the book and read that. In number 8, it says, what is the estimated accounts payable at the end of July? You see what they're trying to get you to see is, all right, if this is the amount of cash you're going to spend, how much are we going to owe? Well, let's go back to July. We said in July, again, do you remember, in July we were going to pay for 30% in July, 70% we're not going to pay for in July. So go back and take the $105,800 and say, well, you know what, in July I never paid that. So at the end of July, I'll still owe for 70%. Remember, in July we paid for 70% of June, but in July we didn't pay the 70% of July's. And this is going to be, what's the 70,000, sometimes it's 35, sometimes it's 56. And let me just check that. $74,060. $74,060. That's going to be your accounts payable at July 31st. You see? Again, you can see right here, this is what you paid, this is what you didn't pay. So this will be your accounts payable, that will be on a balance sheet. You see all these are budgeted. This is the money that you're going to spend. You've got to have $93,000 in July to buy that material. This you're going to have to pay in what? This is going to you have to pay in August. Accounts payable July 31st, but you're going to have to pay that in August. This is going to be the total amount you need, this amount of pounds of steel to run production. You see, again, budgeting does make you think about all these relationships. Very complex, actually. All right, that's 8. Let's do, let's say 9. Let me read 9 to you. 9 says, what is the estimated raw materials inventory balance at the end of July? The estimated raw materials inventory balance at the end of July. I thought we already did that, to tell you the truth. What is the estimated raw materials balance at the end of July? I thought we did that earlier. Didn't we do a raw materials purchases budget? Yeah, we did. Direct materials purchases budget. We needed, unless we get in Indian inventory, was 6,100 pounds. Let me see if I can't tilt that over just so you guys can see it. Again, they're asking us, what is the estimated, this is 9, they want the estimated raw materials inventory balance at July, raw materials inventory balance at the end of July. Let me tilt that back and see if I can show it to you. I'm going to go over and get it, and then I'll have to move the camera back, but we'd already done that. You see, we had a direct materials purchases budget. We know we needed 52,000 pounds. Our desired ending inventory is right here. We already have that. 6,100, so we know it's 6,100. Now let me roll this back, since you can see where I got the number. So we need the ending inventory, we know was 6,100 pounds. And what did they ask? I think they want to know how much we're going to, what is the estimated raw materials? Oh, what is the estimated raw materials in inventory? That's it, I do believe. Oh, they might want it in dollars, though. Yeah, this is 6,100 pounds, which is right, but maybe they want that in dollars. And what did they say? If it's pounds, what do we pay? Each pound, requires 5 pounds. The raw materials cost $2 a pound. I think your author probably wants it in dollars because again, their budget, they've already got this, so I don't see why you'd want this answer again. So that'll be $12,200, isn't it? $12,200 is your ending inventory, and that's raw. That's raw inventory, that's materials. Let me make sure you guys can see that. Yeah, almost. I cut it off just a little bit. Okay. Remember, we got that from an earlier part of the problem. We know that from our materials budget we did earlier, we need 6,100 pounds. That's ending inventory, EI. We know it costs us $2 a pound for steel. That's $12,200. We're going to have $12,200 of ending raw materials inventory, not wrenches, but that's just steel slugs that we're going to use to build. Okay, what now? Let's do 10. Let's see what they ask us in 10. In 10, what is the total estimated direct labor cost for July, assuming the direct labor workforce is adjusted to match hours required to produce the forecasted number of units? Okay, they want the direct labor cost. And the direct labor cost, as we recall, let me see, the direct labor cost would be based on how many you're going to make. And I guess I have to go back, I'll have to adjust my camera again, but what were we going to make? Let me tilt this camera back again, doggone it. You can see over there. Hopefully you can see this, I tilted it enough. We're going to make, units to produce, 10,400 wrenches. So we're going to get that 10,004. In other words, if we know how much we're going to make in wrenches, we'll know how much labor. Because it does say it takes how much labor. It takes 2 hours to machine one of these wrenches. Remember I told them again, they're going to press it, but then they're going to machine, again, the open end wrench and the closed end of the wrench. And they're going to machine the actual knurls in there to grab onto a bolt. So anyway, we're going to make 10,400 wrenches. Let's go back and see what labor it takes. I got to check my camera again because otherwise I could have adjusted myself out of the picture. All right. So how much labor does it take? Well, we know that there's 10,400 wrenches. And we're going to take that times, didn't it say, again, it takes 2 labor hours right here. It takes 2 labor hours to make a wrench. So take that times that. That's 20,800. 20,800 hours. And that's, again, how many labor hours it's going to take. Now, I do have to check and see if they want that in money. What is the total estimated direct labor cost? And I guess they do want it in money. For July, assuming the direct labor workforce is adjusted to match the hours, yeah, they want it in money. So we know that it's 20,800 hours, to make 10,400 wrenches. Now we have to take this times, I believe, $15 an hour. That's the amount, the rate of pay that they're going to give everyone. And that will give us, again, the, the labor cost. So let's do 20,800 times 15, $312,000. And that's your answer to part 10. $312,000 in labor / wages. And that's what they're going to, that's one you're really going to have to pay out, because usually you have to pay out wages pretty quickly. You know, there's not too much delay. So that's what they're looking for in 10. Now let's see what they're looking for in 11. And I have to turn the page. I'm going to the next page, 11. If we assume that there is no fixed manufacturing overhead, and that variable manufacturing overhead is $10 per direct labor hour, what is the unit cost? They really just are saying, what's the budgeted cost to make a wrench? Let's go back and see the budgeted cost to make a wrench. Well, the budgeted cost to make a wrench, let's do it this way. We know that every wrench has direct materials in it. We know that every wrench has direct labor. We know that it has variable overhead. And we know that a wrench has fixed overhead. Remember, again, these are all the costs to produce. And they're asking you, what is the cost, the budgeted cost to make a wrench? Well, I believe they told us that for material, it takes 2 pounds of material. Remember, right? Oh no, I was wrong. 5 pounds, sorry, 5 pounds. It takes 5 pounds of materials. The direct labor, it takes 2 hours. Didn't they? Yeah, to make a wrench takes 2 hours, right here. It says that. The variable overhead, they just told us, is $10 an hour. And they said the fixed overhead, pretend that it is 0. That is totally ridiculous, but your author is making it easy for you. Pretend that's 0. They say, well, what is the cost to make a wrench? The budget. Well, do you agree if it's 5 pounds, what did they say a pound? It was $2 a pound. So take that again times 2. Okay, my camera went off, so I better just recap what I said a minute ago. It asked us what's the ending inventory in wrenches. What's the ending inventory in wrenches at July? I can't remember exactly where I left off, but I knew that we already went, I think I showed you that we can get that. If I know I'm out of camera range right now, but we know from our production budget there was 2,400 wrenches. We knew that that was our inventory. We just calculated that the wrenches cost $60 each. So we already knew that we were going to shoot or aim or try and make an extra 2,400 wrenches for ending inventory. There's 60 each, so that's $144,000 in ending inventory in wrenches. So that was 12. And let me see if we can do 13. 13 says, what is the estimated cost of goods sold and gross margin? What's the cost of goods sold? Well, we already know that we're going to sell, they say we're going to sell in July 10,000 wrenches. So 10,000 wrenches times the cost to make a wrench, get out of the way. 10,000 wrenches is what we're going to sell, right? That's what they said. That's what they said. We're going to make 10,000 wrenches. Times the cost to make a wrench is 60. Well, the cost of goods sold would be $600,000. Again, how much you sell times what it cost you. Do you remember where we got the cost? It just came from right here, 60. Gives you 600, that's the, I'm going to abbreviate it, COGS, cost of goods sold. Now they also ask, what's the gross margin? They're really just saying, what are you going to make on the wrenches? We can get that. Oh boy, I hate to go back. Once again, I have to go back to the, let me tilt the camera. If you remember in the very beginning, we said we were going to sell 10,000 wrenches. They're $70 each. So $700,000 is what we think that we're going to get in sales. And they're really just saying, what's your gross margin? Well, if we come back, we can just say, all right, our sales, let's do it this way. We think our sales are going to be $700,000. We think our cost of goods sold, COGS, will be $600,000. And if we subtract that, we get our gross margin, and that's $100,000. You see, they're trying to say to you, with all this information that you've done, you can start building an income statement. You can start preparing a budgeted income statement. And this is going to be gross margin. Of $100,000. You see, we're very close to having everything we need to do a budgeted income statement. Let's take a look. That's probably going to ask us, they're going to ask us to do that in 14. What is the estimated total selling and administrative expense? Do you see why they're going to do that? They're going to ask us to put they're going to say, go out and get the selling administrative expense, because that's what's next on an income statement. Have we got that? Yeah, usually somewhere in the budget we'll have that information. It says variable selling administrative expenses is $1.80. Fixed selling administrative is $60. Remember what's in that? That's going to be, most of that's going to be salaries and depreciation. So that could be the depreciation on the building that everyone's in, the depreciation of the cars, on their computers. That could be heat and light utilities. The variable cost is paper, pencils, toner, things like that. That again, every time they make a wrench, that they have to fill out some paperwork every hour. But it looks like, again, if we know that, and then 14, we can go ahead and say, all right, in 14, what's the variable selling administrative? Well, they say it's every time we sell a wrench, we spend $1.80 in paper and toner and, again, clerical work, $1.80. So let's do that. We're going to sell 10,000 wrenches times $1.80. That should be $18,000, isn't it? Let me get out of the way of the camera. $18,000. And then we're going to add to that. It says the $60,000 in salaries and depreciation. So that's $60,000. And that will be equal to $78,000. And I know what they're going to do. They're going to say, go ahead and put that in here and do the income statement. So let's put selling and administrative expense, $78,000 right here. I haven't read that, but I'm just sure in part 15 that's probably what they're going to ask. What's the operating income for July? That's what they're going to ask us to do, is get that operating income. And so we shall. All right, well, here we have the sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin. Take out the selling administrative expense, and you have net income. That should be $22,000. And that is your net income, but that's budgeted. Now, I realize this is an overview, this chapter, and I'm sure you're thinking, oh gosh, there's a lot of numbers. But that's probably why years ago I didn't really want to work in budgeting. I liked managerial accounting and cost. They didn't call it managerial, they called it cost accounting. And I was actually in the cost division for the plant, and I did like that. But this is the kind of detail you have to deal with, and you can see why it is beneficial. It's a promotion. If they ask you if you want to go into budget, they're really saying, we want you to see the whole company. We want you to have that corporate view of how everything fits together. It's an opportunity. Don't pass it by. Yes, I'm right. It is detailed, and it probably is a big pain, and they're huge spreadsheets that you put together. But I do guarantee you will have a much better scope of the whole company, and you'll be promoted much faster, like I said. But this is the end of problem, by the way, I should label that. That last one was 15. That's the whole problem. 15, that was, again, getting the net income. So again, 14 was getting the 78. 15 was marrying this, putting it all together and getting the 22. Anyway, this is a great overview problem. I'm going to shut down just for a second, and then we're going to go to exercise 1 in chapter 8. And I'm probably going to put that on the next test for sure. I'm almost positive I'll put the next problem we're going to work is easier, I think, than this. It's just I think it's a cash collection budget. But anyway, let me set up and we'll do that.